Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here, talking Thousand Suns from beginners all the way up to experienced and even competitive play, and I'm joined today by Matt from Odds of War. Matt from Odds of War, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Matt from Odds of War, a little, small little channel here on YouTube focused on Kill Team and 40K and sort of all the different little things associated with it.
Brilliant. And why, if you can enlighten the viewers, have I come to you for Thousand Suns?
Well, so Thousand Suns are a faction near and dear to my heart. So I started off in 40K with Orcs, and then with Kill Team releasing, I've always been really into the aesthetics of the army. So I basically picked up the Thousand Suns Start Collecting box and just went to town. And then over the past year with COVID, I've basically slept, and breathed Thousand Suns as I went from Kill Team to a full 40K army. So I've got a pretty solid handle on what they're about.
Brilliant. And of course, this is a faction focus, so we are going to go from beginner to advanced, and certainly I will say that some top players are terrible at explaining why something is good. So I would take someone that knows the basics but can present it well over someone that is amazing but, can't talk. Not that I'm saying that you're basics only, of course. You do know what you're doing.
No, that's fine. Yeah. It's funny because there's I've always thought about there's the win at all costs, and then there's those that are the casual at all costs, and they have the fluffiest possible, and then you get somewhere in the middle, which are generally I think for most people who would be watching something like this, they're probably, if they go to a tournament, they're ending up in mid-table anyway. So they'll probably see someone like myself across the table from them.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm an acceptable player, but I've never really taken Thousand Suns to a tournament to try and win with them, but I do think they're really strong. So let's kick this off with a few things. Firstly, as the audience will already be able to see how long this video is, we don't know yet, but if you've seen some of the other faction focuses, I limit them to 2 hours. Thousand Suns, I suspect we're not going to need to go quite that long because they only have 3 normal data sheets and there are no sub-factions to discuss. So we're probably going to burn through this about 10 minutes, call it a day. Go for lunch early. However, let's start with the absolute basics. Obviously, if somebody's clicked on this, they already know who Thousand Suns are. But can you give us a very brief rundown about why, what are the advantages of playing Thousand Suns over anything else?
So I would be remiss when talking about why play Thousand Suns over anything else in Kill Team to mention that they are one of only 2 factions from the core rulebook that have access to the actually casting a psychic power. So it's them and Grey Knights, and so that's probably why just right off the bat why you got into Thousand Suns for Kill Team is just for access to the psychic phase, because anyone who's played Tau or against Tau know that missing out on phases is a big impact, and so for Thousand Suns to have access to a whole phase that someone else doesn't have can really swing the game in your favor, and it's a pretty cool power fantasy. The other reason to play them is, like we already alluded to, a very limited data sheet set, so easy to pick up and learn, and like you said as well, they're actually pretty good once you get into optimizing them. So you can build from this limited data sheet set, you can build surprisingly fluffy lists, and you can build actually some pretty mean lists out there that can really put the hurting on your opponent.
Suddenly, if we're looking at any of the big tournaments, they haven't... I think their best placing really has been at LVO 2020. Yes, that's right. Where they managed to come in top 8, piloted by James Skinner. But outside of that, I haven't really heard of them doing particularly well tournament-wise. But I think they're a great beginner army as well, because they teach you about every single aspect of the game. They teach you the difference between cheap troops and when you should take them versus expensive troops, when to take them, and also forcing you to conserve and focus on your big powerful unit, which of course is the Aspiring Sorcerer. So
Yes.
with that said, shall we just jump straight in to
Let's do it.
to their... Oh, I think actually we start with their special rule, don't we? Let's think. So, no, we don't. Okay, we go. Yes, we do. Brotherhood of Sorcerers.
Right.
This is... I'll read it out because this is just a very small thing. But when it is your turn to choose a Psyker from your kill team to attempt to manifest psychic powers in this phase, you could choose up to 2 models from your kill team to do so. Resolve all of one model's attempts before choosing the next model. In addition, the ranges of all psychic powers manifested by your models in your kill team are increased by 3 inches, which gives you a 21-inch range, which, to be honest, in kill team is... I don't think I've ever wished I had an extra 3 inches on my Cybolt, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And this is, for those of you that don't know, maybe you only have your core book at the moment, this is a rule that comes along with elites, and they get this as a sub-faction bonus, whereas, Marines might be able to choose from Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Salamanders, etc. They get this. I will also note that in elites, both of the only 2 psychic factions, Grey Knights and Thousand Suns, are both able to do 2 Cybolts a phase. Once you go to commanders, that changes the game, but in this, both of the psychic factions can do it.
Yeah. And just to dip the toe into commanders, not to bury the lead, but that's really the only place that you're going to get any real use out of that extra 3-inch range is on things other than Cybolt, which you can only access if you're playing commanders.
You know what? I play so little commanders, I hadn't even considered that any other psychic power might require range. So there you go.
Yeah. So it's all psychic powers. So
Yeah.
again, it probably won't come up. It'll be one of those things like Death to the False Emperor that when it comes up, you're just going to breeze right past it without even realizing it. But maybe it allows you an extra play here or there.
Sure enough. Okay, so that I'm following a custom codex, which the people on screen can see. So it then goes into the Sun's psychic powers, which we're not going to talk about because that's not relevant until we talk about commanders. So we skip that, and we get straight to the humble Rubric Marine.
Yes.
Oh, where to even start with this? So there are actually, essentially, 2 data sheets contained in this. There's the Rubric Marines and the Gunners, and then there's the Aspiring Sorcerer. I consider them 2 data sheets, even though they're not, obviously, just because the Aspiring Sorcerer has a different movement, can use Psychic, cannot use some of the abilities that the data sheet in total lists, and it's like... So let's start with, I guess, one of the best things. It's an army-wide thing. Every model in your list has a 5-up invuln save.
Yes, that can massively help. So one of the things that really hurts Thousand Suns is, of course, many other factions' access to plasma, and that 5-up invuln is key to just trying to weather that storm.
Yeah, a lot of other factions, when they're faced against plasma, will pay CP to get a 5-up invuln save against, whatever it is. So the fact that your entire faction has it, just base, really good.
Yeah.
Do you want to cover what a basic Rubric Marine is?
Sure, yeah. So from the fluff side, a Rubric Marine is basically an empty suit of armor. There's just a soul trapped in there and some dust. But mechanically, it's a Marine, which is nice. It's not quite as I'd argue it's about equivalent to a standard Marine. Maybe not quite as good as some of your Primaris out there, but a 5-inch move because they're a little slower because they're just a empty suit of armor. 3-up for weapon skill and ballistic skill, so they can hit pretty reliably. Strength and toughness 4, 1 wound, 1 attack, which that's really it already. You can see this force is going to not be combat focused as you go on. You can build a combat focused list, but if you're playing Rubric Marines, you don't really want to Barney in combat. Leadership 7, 3-up save. Where it gets spicy though with that 3-up save is, of course, a almost faction-wide rule of all is dust. And you can't, when you talk about the save characteristic of a Rubric Marine, you can't really just look at it and go 3-up and that's it. Because the all is dust is add 1 to saving throws for Rubric Marine or Rubric Marine Gunners if the attack has a damage characteristic of 1, and in addition, the -1 modifier to hit rolls for moving and shooting heavy weapons don't apply, which will come up in a minute when we talk about Rubric Marine Gunners. But that that +1 to your saving throws can be so impactful because, of course, in Kill Team, there's an absolute plethora of damage 1 weapons. So when you look at a Rubric Marine, you're essentially like a pseudo Terminator because you have your 2-up save, and of course, like we already mentioned, you have your 5-up invuln. So it can make them just that slightly more durable, and make your opponent spend just that little bit of extra attacks on them just to punch through your 2-up save.
Yeah, I think All Is Dust is incredibly strong. Now, on a general meta-wide thing, Kill Team is very much the game of special weapons. So your opponent will have a way to negate that in their list somewhere.
Absolutely.
Like almost 100%. But it does mean that they can't just throw anything at a Rubric Marine. Like, with the damage 1 weapon, you're almost impossible to take down. Like, it's really strong.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was alluding to earlier about plasma being a real problem, and like thank goodness for that 5-up invuln, because the overcharged plasma gun is all but the perfect weapon for killing a Rubric Marine, because strength 8, so you're wounding on 2s, AP 3, so you bump up against that invuln, and then damage 2, so you negate the all is dust. But while we are here though, on all is dust, a really important thing is that it's add 1 to saving throws. So you're not modifying the save characteristic, but you're modifying the die roll itself, which means that it does actually affect your invulnerable saving throw as well. So that's like a really huge thing. If they're not super common, but
are you sure?
High AP. I'm like 99%, unless I missed an FAQ, because it's add 1 to the saving throw, and when you make an invulnerable save, that's your saving throw. So you actually can boost up your Rubric Marine to a 4-up invuln if, say, you're receiving an attack from something like a Power Sword, which would be at least pre-Pariah Nexus, AP -3 and damage 1.
Okay. I'm not going to dwell on this too long. I believe that's not correct. But I will make sure to research it and drop in the top comment what this is. Oh, you know what? I have to edit this afterwards. You will see text on screen right now telling you whether Matt is correct or incorrect on this one. But either way, it's still strong. It's still good. And I suppose we could then quickly talk about the -1 to moving and shooting heavy weapons. This is a bit of in 40k this is really good. In Kill Team it's a little bit questionable. I mean, obviously it gives you flexibility. There is one heavy weapon that the Rubric Marines can take, and that is, I can't remember what
the Soul Reaper Cannon.
Thank you. The Soul Reaper Cannon.
Yes, no problem. Yeah, the Soul Reaper Cannon's actually a really interesting gun. It sort of speaks to both the strength and the weakness of the faction as far as damage output with ranged weapons, because it's 4 shots, it's AP -3, which is really nice, but it's damage 1, and that's the like part that starts to hurt, because you'll wound your opponents pretty reliably, you'll punch through saves very reliably. But when you get to that injury roll, it's damage 1.
50-50. That's the way it goes. But I mean, you've got a lot of shots. You are, as you say, wounding, getting through armor really reliably. And to be honest, there's definitely a place for guns that just give flesh wounds. Like, a flesh wound isn't bad. I think that's one way you've got to view these things. The other thing there is, of course, you've got 4 shots base, but with this weapon, your intention is to spray as many bullets across the board as possible. So even though you do not take a penalty for moving with them because of all its dust, you might want to still make it a heavy so that you can use more bullets, giving it 5 shots a turn for 1 CP. That's how I've run them in the past, quite often.
Yeah.
The other one is demolitions. Which
Demolitions,
of course
that's
wounding on 2s,
that's the big argument is, do you want to wound on 2s or do you want 5 shots?
Yes. Now that I've said it out loud, demolitions. I don't know what I was thinking. Just go demolitions.
That's how I run them, because you probably want to ready anyway, so you're not really worried about moving. But even if you were moving, you have your all is dust to ignore it, and then you're wounding basically everything in the game on 2s. When you get to like Death Guard and a few of the other T5 models out there, then you're wounding on 3s, because then it's 4s plus 1. But the thing that I like about the demolitions for him is that, which we'll talk a bit more about when we get to some of the advanced stuff, is you really start forcing interesting decisions on your opponent, because do they stand out in the open so that you don't get a +1 to wound, or do they get obscured so they're harder to hit, but then they give you the +1 to wound?
Yeah, it's nobody really wants to get shot by this weapon. It's a really good weapon, I think, is one thing to say. Like, hordes don't like it because you have so many shots. Elites don't like it because you can get straight through their armor. It's a great weapon, and on any open board, I can't see a reason not to take it, essentially. Which brings us to, I think we've got to take a quick step back and just look at the away from the gunner, because that's all there is to the gunner, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. So
the basic Rubric Marine, first things first, doesn't have a bolt gun, it has an Inferno bolt gun. Again, this is another of Thousand Suns kind of generic rules that basically everything has. All of the Rubric Marines all have AP -2. The Inferno bolt gun and also the Warp Flamer. AP -2 on a Flamer, damn. AP -2 on a bolter. A normal tactical Marine bolter isn't really that dangerous. You can kind of ignore it almost. But if you put AP -2 on that, suddenly that's a weapon that you need to be afraid of.
Oh yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, a lot of factions out there, they take small, low-pointed models that are cheap and easy to kill and use them for their backfield objective holders. But you can actually make a very good argument for using a Rubric Marine with just a regular bolter for him as your backfield objective, because like you just said, a normal Marine holding a backfield, shooting off 2 bolter shots a turn, whatever.
Yeah.
But when those bolter shots are -2 AP, suddenly that becomes an actual thing you need to look out for.
Definitely. I mean, they are 16 points, even with the regular Warp Flamer there. Warp Flamer. What's it called? Inferno Bolt Gun. That's what I meant. But there's still more for the Rubric Marines. First things first, let's go with the other weapon option. So you don't need to be a gunner to take this. A gunner is limited to 1. You know, you can only take 1 Rubric Marine gunner. However, if you want to take the Flamer option, which again is just also hitting D6, strength 4, AP -2, damage 1, that's just a regular Rubric Marine. Now it will bump them up to 20 points, but you can take, if you want the entire team to be Flamers, you can do that, which is mildly terrifying.
Yes, there's a lot to be said for this Flamer. They are, D6 shots, so there's of course plenty of chances that you just roll the 1 or the 2 shots, and so it's not really that much more effective. But with kill teams, plentiful modifiers to hit, an auto-hitting weapon is always welcome. At least 1, if not 2, in your kill team, especially for these guys. And when you start layering on things like a veteran that moves up the board before the game even starts, so they're just in range right from the get-go, or even things like if you don't want to do demolitions on the Soul Reaper cannon and you do demolitions on the Flamer, that's still pretty good.
Definitely. I think there's room for taking more than one of these in any list, especially if you're doing arena of any sort. Because of course it
Yes.
is an assault weapon, so you can advance and be less hampered by your 5-inch move. Really solid weapon, will set you back 20 points, but really strong, I would say.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the final thing for the Rubric Marine and the Rubric Marine Gunner, which is the Icon of Flame. Now, this is a 1-point upgrade. It can't go on the Gunner. It's only on the Rubric Marine. I'll read it out quickly. At the start of your turn in the Psychic phase, roll a d6 for each model from your kill team equipped with an Icon of Flame. You can only have one. Just to get that out there. This is worded from 40k, so you can only have one.
Yeah, you
on
can
a
make an
six-
argument it's like a future proofing as well if
Sure.
they one day let you take more than one.
On a 6, inflict 1 mortal wound on the closest enemy model within 12 inches of the model being rolled for. Now, this isn't a psychic attack, so you don't get plus 3 inches to that range, just to quickly throw that out there. But on a 6, you get a mortal wound.
Yeah.
For 1 point.
I think, generally I think it's like a must take for your list, especially because I find myself, especially with Thousand Suns, ending up just a few points shy of 100 or 125 or wherever you were building to. And so for 1 point, even if you never roll it the whole game, you were just going to leave that point on the table anyway. But if you roll it, and I have had games where I've gotten extremely lucky, and for 1 point you push out 2 or 3 mortal wounds across a game, of course that's exceptional. But when that happens, hey, that's great.
I suppose the only thing I would add to this is, for some reason, I often find myself 1 point shy of either 100 or 125. And inevitably, that means I then have to decide, do I want the Icon of Flame, or do I want the Warp, what's it called? Warp Flame
Warp
Bolt
Flame
Pistol? Yeah, the pistol for the Inspiring Sorcerer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to decide. And I can never decide.
Yeah, it's hard because pistols are one of those weapons in the game that like you want them to be good, but because they're pistol, they're like they just miss the mark.
I'll tell you what though, if we do get the FAQ update that we're all hoping Pariah Nexus will bring us, and that pistol becomes 12 inches, then it's no longer a question.
Then no choice at all.
Yeah, it's not a question, yeah. The only other minor rules niggle for Icon of Flame is that the way it's worded, you don't need line of sight. So it's not the closest enemy model in line of sight. You can shoot this through a wall. It's just, hits them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a psychic attack, so it doesn't follow those rules. It's just a thing that happens. And I think that's it for the Rubric Marines and the Rubric Marine Gunner, which brings us to the second part of the Rubric Marine datasheet, which is the Aspiring Sorcerer.
Yes.
So
now, these guys, these are, really why you're taking it. So like we said before, they have the access to the psychic phase. So they come standard with Cybolt, 1 cast, 1 deny. Now, what's interesting about them, especially from a beginner perspective, is that they are subtly different from the Marines and the Marine Gunners. They have an extra inch of movement. They, of course, have the extra leadership, as is how all the sort of sergeants of these units go. They get an extra attack. They do not get all is dust, which that's one of those things that can really trip people up. They expect their sorcerer to be just as tanky as their Marines and their Marine Gunners when they're not quite, because they don't get that +1 to the saving throw. But in exchange, they get transhuman physiology, so they get to ignore the penalty for their first flesh wound, which can come in quite handy because when you're playing with the psychic phase, you can end up hurting yourself on perils. So to be able to at least ignore the first flesh wound is a powerful effect to have there for him.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I don't think I've ever seen a list that hasn't taken Inspiring Sorcerer.
Oh yeah, he's a
Um,
must take.
yeah. And interestingly, I suppose, you know, when Kill Team first released, a lot of people would use him as the leader. But since then,
Hmm.
we've learned how foolish we were. He's much more effective as a combat
Yes.
because he doesn't get a regular. He's not just, you know, a Space Marine sergeant with a fist. He gets a force stave.
Yes. And that thing is practically your only really good melee weapon. So you want to, if you're looking to build a more competitive list, like you've got to put him at the combat to get that extra attack.
Yeah.
It's I believe it makes him strength 6 if I'm looking at this correct. Yeah, strength. So it's strength +2, so 6, AP -1, and D3 damage.
That's right.
So that can really help you punch down some of those multi-wound models and get a good on a D3. Of course, the math is in your favor to get a 2
Yeah.
or better. So, you know,
Yeah, he's really good, and he normally has a what are they called? Inferno bolt pistol,
mhm.
which is it's 12 inches,
Yep,
strength 4, AP -2
AP2.
still, which
Yep.
is really good. Damage 1, obviously, but you can for 1 point swap it for, as we were just talking about earlier, the warp flame bolt pistol, which
Hmm.
now that's strength 3, isn't
It's
it?
strength 3, yeah. So you're trading
Yes.
off
Yeah.
a strength for being able to fire it in combat. But generally, that's where he wants to be anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in, not too bad.
Yes. I always struggle with whether or not to take it. If you have the point, you should take it. Unless you have a really, really specific strategy that involves him covering a rear objective for some reason and you
Right.
haven't run him as combat and he's just a guy and you've wanted to put everything into other models and you just want him to sit there, shoot from long distance and fire a cybolt a turn. Fair enough, you're doing you, good for
Yeah.
you.
Right.
But that's not kind of typical because much like a lot of the Grey Knights who you look at them and you think, oh, well, they're psychers, they've got guns, they're long range. They're not. They are far more deadly in close combat. That's
In
where
close
you want
combat.
them.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it about the aspiring sorcerer because
Yeah.
you can make him your leader, but he's really best as your combat specialist
Sure.
and moving up and threatening different parts of the board.
Definitely. Use him as the beat stick that he is, which means we only have to talk about Death to the False Emperor, which you will always forget. We might as well not talk
Yeah,
about it because you won't remember it.
yeah,
However, what it is if you are against or attacking a model with the Imperium keyword, anytime you roll a hit roll of a 6 in the fight phase, you get to make an additional attack with the same weapon against the same target. Do note that this is not, you don't get an additional hit, you roll the hit roll again. And that's it. Which, hey, that's really strong. If you're the aspiring sorcerer and you get that, that's amazing. That's really
right.
strong. But you won't remember to roll this. And it won't be a
No.
6 on the times you do remember. So there you go. That's my
Yep.
opinion.
Especially it'll be the exact time when you're like, boy, if I can only kill this model, then I'll win the game. And you'll go, boy, I sure hope I trigger Death to the False Emperor, and you won't.
You will not.
But then other times it'll be like turn 2 in the game in a combat that's not going to be super impactful, and you roll the 6s, and you'll just glaze right on
Yeah.
past them.
Yeah. Or you say, oh, I rolled a 6. I get to attack again. I'm Tau. So, yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Okay, that's it. That's kind of our biggest data sheet almost because you have a lot
yeah.
of
That's
odd options in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much the heavy lifting of this faction is that data sheet, and like we said, it's a pretty small faction, but in this you do get a good selection of specialists. Of
Mm.
course, you get your Cybolt, um, and like I said, they do the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, well, we're getting into the generics later, but I quite like Thousand Suns as a beginner army. You have just enough options that it's interesting to make decisions, and your different
Hmm.
options do very clearly, distinctly different things. And yeah, so let's
Yeah,
move to
and
the
learning to again, on the beginner side of things, learning to position your psi bolts and position, if you do take the Icon of Flame, position those pieces so that you can put those mortal wounds on the models that you want is it's a great learning experience.
Great way to learn, definitely. Which takes us to the Tzaangor datasheet. Now this looks on the screen tiny, but there's actually quite a bit to say around the strategy of Tzaangor, but let's start with the basics. So they are... Oh yeah, that's easier if you talk than I do. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your basic Tzaangor, a 6-inch move, a 3-up weapon skill, which is important, a 4-up ballistic skill, which sounds pretty bad on paper, but the truth is you're probably never firing a gun with these guys, even if you do take them. So it's inconsequential. Strength 4, toughness 4, which is fantastic because Tzaangors are basically your version of chaff units. They're your cultists, so to speak. So to have them be toughness 4 and strength 4 is a huge boost. 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 6, and a 6-up save. But that brings us back to that you have your army-wide 5-up invuln. So while you're saying 6-up save, they actually have a 5-up.
Yes, and just to quickly say, they are 7 points each. For some reason in my mind, I was about to say they were 9 points, and I scrolled down to check, and they're 7. Wow. Okay, so let's quickly talk about, as you say, the 5-up save. Let's quickly look at the different weapon options, because those obviously have to be talked about.
Yeah, so on these guys, you can either take Tzaangor blades, or you can take an auto pistol and a chainsword, and then one Tzaangor can have a Brayhorn, which we'll touch on in a second. Now, the auto pistol and chainsword, if you've seen auto pistols anywhere else, it's the single shot, strength 3, AP 0, damage 1, 12-inch range. So not that great. And a chainsword, as everyone knows, is the strength user, AP 0, damage 1, and it gives you an extra attack when you fight with it. The Tzaangor blade, though, to me, is the far superior choice because it's basically a chainsword with AP -1.
Yeah. So you're giving up a single 12-inch strength 3 shot on a pistol to get AP -1.
On a 4-up.
Yes. So in the past, I recommended consider on your roster having 1 or 2 of the pistol versions. Because the reason you have a Tzaangor is it's cheap, and you are almost in every single battle going to have 2 back on your points. So why not give them a shot, right?
Sure.
I have since changed my mind. I do not think there is any place on any list to do that. If they are able to do that, if they are able to take a shot, they are also able to be shot. And your single strength 3 shot, most likely hitting on 5s, let's be honest, if not 6s. Long range and obscured, very easy when you're 12 inches, is not worth getting shot off a point and losing that point. So,
yeah,
I'm going to say pretty definitively, just run them with the Tzaangor blades. There you go.
Yeah, and that because that AP -1, especially as we look through more of their options, when you start looking at they can be your zealot specialist, for example, that AP -1 is going to start doing some work. If you go into a guard list, they're only saving on 6s. If you're going in even just to a Marine list, they're only saving on 4s.
It's not
like
bad.
that AP -1 is just enough to push your opponent into failing a save.
Yes. Now, a quick little... Yeah, I'll say that at the end. You still have a 5-up invuln save, but note that for 7 points, you are T4. That makes you more survivable than you might think. Okay, there are most factions that have a 7-point model are not T4. The only other one would be Orcs, who only get a 6-up save that can be removed, but you have a 5-up invulnerable save. Do not think of Tzaangors as something that will die easily, especially in kill team where most people will be bringing high damage, high AP weapons. Your strength T4 and your minus your invuln save essentially negate people's big advantages. I'm struggling to speak today. Of plasma melter, all that sort of stuff. So you are
Well, and
you're good.
you mentioned the orc boy, and if anyone has experience with orcs and are looking at playing the Thousand Sons or getting into them, uh, or even have experience playing against orc boys, a very useful way to think of the Tzaangor is like a better orc boy, because as you said, equivalent cost, but they actually have the better save. Even if you were taking the Death Skull's trait for the 6-up invuln for orcs, Tzaangor has the 5-up invuln, so he's the strength 4, toughness 4, puts out a couple of attacks, and has that 5-up invuln, so can stick out. He's a great chaff piece to throw at your enemy, especially if they have something that that you don't want touching you in combat. Just feed him a Tzaangor, and you'd be surprised how often they stick around.
And they're always on 2 attacks. 2 attacks hitting on 3s is pretty good. Yeah. They can get things done.
Yeah. So then you have the Twist Bray in there, which is like it's like their sergeant, and he just has an extra leadership, as is typical, and he has the extra attack, which then means that he is thrown out 3 attacks with his Tzaangor blades, and he's only an extra point. Now you can only take 1 for the kill team, but again, for 1 extra point, if you're taking Tzaangors, you might as well take the Twist Bray, and then he's really where you want to layer on when you're looking at your specialisms. That's where you want to layer your specialisms, specifically the leader specialism.
Yes. Yeah. It's such a shame, because getting a model with their stats with 3 attacks for 8 points is really, really good. But you need a cheap leader to sit at the back on a point and not get shot. So unfortunately, you will very rarely see a Tzaangor leader in combat. Because the only other option is the Aspiring Sorcerer. Like, the only other realistic option. Yeah. And 1 plasma, he's gone. You know, you'd be better, and you can't leave that 21-point model sat at the back doing nothing. That's just not going to work very well for you. So the Tzaangor Twist Bray, that's the word, is the one that's going to be sat at the back doing nothing the entire game. But luckily, if somebody does decide to charge him, you're kind of happy about it. You're not really complaining too much. So yeah,
and then now, since we've sort of danced around it, there is, of course, the Brayhorn. Now, the Brayhorn's really interesting and is one of those tricky things, again, just kind of like how the Aspiring Sorcerer doesn't get all his dust, but does get transhuman. The Brayhorn subtly changes the Tzaangors for you. So what it does for you is you add 1 to advance and charge rolls made for Tzaangors within 6 inches of any friendly models equipped with a Brayhorn. You can only take 1. But you're probably not using that unless you're not using that effect, I should say, unless you are making kind of like a Tzaangor rush list where you're just like flooding the board with Tzaangors. Where it's really useful is that because if you take a Brayhorn, that gives your Tzaangor access to the comms specialism, which is so huge for this kill team, because with the Rubric Marine and the Rubric Marine Gunners, a lot of your big hitters are in the shooting phase, and you actually, with the Rubrics, you don't have access to something like the sniper specialism. So having a comms can really help that ranged output for your team.
Yes, pairing a comms Tzaangor with the Rubric Marine Gunner with the Soul Reaper Cannon, you're hitting almost everything. Well, in reality, it's still going to be hitting on 3s because chances are they're going to be obscured. But you're hitting on 2s, wounding on, if he's demo, hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, AP -2. If
3 even for the Soul Reaper.
For AP -2, you're getting through almost, like, nothing stands up to you, to that gun, to that little combo. Yeah. Now, it's not a cheap combo. It's going to set you back, I think it's 32 points in total, because it's 21 for the Soul Reaper Cannon, or 20 for the Soul Reaper Cannon, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, I think, for the comms. But
Yeah.
you know what? Do it.
Yeah.
That
Well,
model
and
sat on a point, so it's doing something for you. It's holding an objective, freeing up other models, and yeah, really, really strong.
yeah, and the nice thing about that too is, like you said, if you plant it on an objective with hopefully a good or just even a decent line of sight down the field, uh, you're going to control the pace of that engagement, because sure, maybe you've got some pieces advancing up that they need to deal with, but if they don't direct their fire to that comms demolition combo in the back, you will like just whittle down their kill team just utterly over like 2 or 3 turns.
Yes, they are super good. And in reality, that's kind of the those two data sheets are what you are going to see on the board in every single game. I can't really imagine anybody not taking the Aspiring Sorcerer or not taking a single Tzaangor, unless they're going super fluffy, which we can talk about later. However, there is a third data sheet, obviously, which is, in my opinion, one of the most controversial data sheets to come out. It's bizarre. But let's talk about exactly what it is, and then we'll talk about why it's an odd data sheet to release, and how it interacts with their Subfaction, which we began this interview with, of course, which is being able to use the Cybot power twice, and why it's so questionable. So this is the
Yes.
Scarab Occult Terminator. Now, again, similar to the Rubric Marines, we have something a little bit odd. We have the Terminator, and we have the Gunner, and then separately, we have the Sorcerer. Exactly the same as the Rubric Marines. There is the all is dust ability. The Terminator and the Gunner get it. The Sorcerer doesn't. As we explained that for like 10 minutes with the Rubric Marine data sheet, we don't need to explain that again. But just know, same deal. And shall we get into what the basic Terminator is, I suppose?
Yeah. So just before I do want to say, like, you said it perfectly of saying it's like a controversial data sheet, because I have such a love-hate relationship with these guys. I've had games where they do the business, and I mean, effectively a single Terminator will win me the game. And then I've had games that they just don't. They don't perform anywhere near to what they should be. So the basic Terminator, a 4-inch move, so Terminator armor across the game, takes off an inch of movement. So whereas a Rubric Marine is 5, your Scarab Occult Terminator is 4. 3 up for weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength 4, toughness 4, 2 wounds, which is nice. Still weak to that plasma gun, unfortunately. 2 attacks, which is, again, that's good. Now we're starting to get somewhere with combat. Leadership 8 and a 2-up save. And like other Terminators and the rest of your kill team, they have that 5-up invuln save, which is nice, and all is dust.
Yeah, so very quickly to touch on that, well, I don't know why I'm talking about the negatives straight away, but if an enemy is looking to remove a 16-point Rubric Marine, they are going to fire a plasma at it. That plasma is exactly the same stats-wise at killing a 16-point Rubric Marine as a 40-point Terminator, because you're not any tougher, so it's still wounding you on 2s. It's still AP -3, which is pushing your 2 up to the 5
to
up.
your invuln.
And then it's 2 damage, and you have 2 wounds. You are the same as a 16-point model. And every faction will have a plasma to deal with you. Essentially, I mean, they don't, but they
they'll
have something.
or their equivalent. Their other high damage.
Yeah. So it's so hard to really recommend taking a basic. In fact, you know what? I've never seen anybody recommend a basic Terminator.
No, I think the basic Terminator you just skip right past because of exactly what you've said. Just the math is so badly against them in terms of durability. And now, to be fair, they do bring the Inferno Combi Bolter, which is the rapid fire 2. Again, it's strength 4. It has that AP -2. Again, damage 1. So, I mean, if you are looking for, I guess double the shots again, but it's like you could spend for less points than the one Terminator, you can buy two Rubric Marines, have the same shot output, and then
Yeah.
you're twice as durable. So I think you just don't play the basic Terminator.
Yes.
Now the Scarab Occult Gunner, you've got a bit more. It's exactly the same as the basic Terminator, except that you can take a maximum of two. And then, just like the Rubric Marine Gunner, they get access to the Soul Reaper Cannon. They get access to the Heavy Warp Flamer, which is Strength 5, AP -2, Damage 1. And it's just like a flamer. It's a heavy flamer, basically, for them, but with better AP. And then they get what I think is, if you're looking to take something for the Terminator, this is why you're taking the Gunner, is the Hellfire missile rack. 24-inch range, heavy 2. But remember, you ignore the movement penalty for moving with a heavy weapon. Strength 8, AP -2, damage D3. So if you're taking Scarab Occult Terminators at all, this is what you're taking them for, is this Hellfire missile rack, and then ideally comboed up with either the Heavy Warp Flamer or the Soul Reaper Cannon, because then you can get a pretty tasty little gun platform there on that guy.
Really, you have two options when it comes to this data sheet, and that is the Scarab Occult Terminator Gunner with the Hellfire. What is it? A
Hellfire missile rack.
Hellfire missile rack, which is amazing. And I personally like to pair that up with the Hellfire missile rack, and because it's 0 points, the flamer that they have, the heavy warp flamer.
Yes.
I can't really see a point to keep them with the combi bolter. Well, maybe there is a point, but personally, I like that flamer. And yeah, I think that is a very valid option. Anecdotally, when I was at LVO and playing Necrons, there was one of those models with the Heavy Warp Flamer and a Hellfire Missile Rack paired up. The Thousand Suns player in the top 8 took that against me, and I went into it with one of my Lich Guards, and he made a crucial error. I suppose this is really just a Thousand Suns tip with this specific model against Necrons. He started by flaming me, which was great, and I think he took me down to the injury roll multiple times. Mm-hmm. But of course, he has both weapons, so he then, when that didn't kill me, took me to a flesh wound. He then used the Hellfire Missile Rack, and he did this twice throughout the game. And both times, he flamed me, took me to an injury roll, and then because the Hellfire Missile Rack is more damage, I then rolled the 6 on the reanimation protocols.
Yes. That's heartbreaking for him. Yeah. Now we have been remiss just to miss even the regular Scarab Occult Terminators, even though you're not taking them. All your Terminators and your Gunners are also armed with power swords.
Yes.
So they're respectable in combat with 2 attacks apiece, strength 4, AP -3, damage 1.
Yes.
So they're not, they're no slouches there. I like this Gunner, like you said, Hellfire Missile Rack, Heavy Warp Flamer. You have the Power Sword. I like to, you have access to a tactic where you can, the colloquial term is deep strike, but you can place him on the board at the end of the movement phase. When you do that, you put him in reserve, and you bring him out at the end of the movement phase, and you have him just right off the bat danger close to something that needs to die in your opponent's army. It can really change your opponent's movement priorities when you can put that type of pressure on them.
Yes, a really good thing to note with them is this is just a generic tactic. And with this kind of model, you can always deploy it into reserves. Then it will cost you a CP to deep strike it anywhere you want on board outside of 5 inches, yes. But because you have not just a long range weapon, but also a shorter range, very effective at killing weapon, if you if the enemy puts a big threat towards you, you can
Mhm.
always deploy within 1 inch of the board edge within your deployment zone for no CP. So if they do actually put a big threat up against you turn 1, you can just go back into your deployment zone and be in range of the heavy warp flamer and the Hellfire missile rack, and then to charge it next turn. Because of the power sword, you are pretty good at killing stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Then, of course, there's the sorcerer, which, as we mentioned before, has the flip flop between all is dust and transhuman. But like the sorcerer before, the aspiring, he can cast a Cybolt, and then now he's the other reason that you even look at this data sheet, is because suddenly you're casting 2 Cybolts a turn. You're pretty reliably, because Cybolt has that warp charge of 5, you're pretty reliably getting 2 mortal wounds output across your opponent's kill team before anyone's even had a chance to shoot, which can be very impactful.
Yeah, this is where it becomes a bit questionable, because obviously we had the Elites book release and we were like, oh wow, Thousand Suns can use 2 Cybolts. So obviously I should take 2 models that can cast Cybolt. Not always. Cybolt's really strong against certain factions. Not so much against Marines anymore, because of course they now have 2 wounds. But against other elite factions, really good. If you're ever up against Harlequins, it's a must take, for example.
Oh yeah.
But if you're up against a Horde, well actually I would prefer to have the Hellfire missile rack in my corner than a second Cybolt. So despite the Subfaction, he's not an auto include. He
No.
is a specific niche include, and that goes for all of the Terminators, in fact. Don't get me wrong, the Hellfire missile rack's really good, but it's so many points. Sometimes I would rather just take 4 Tzaangors. You
Yeah,
know?
I think there's a definite case to be made for the gunner and the sorcerer being an include in your roster,
Oh,
no
definitely.
question.
Yes.
But in a list, it's like you said, it's very matchup dependent.
Yeah.
Depending on what you see across the table from you, they may be, like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with them. They may be the models that win you the game, or they may be the models that lose you the game if you've picked them incorrectly, which is a shame, because as far as actual modeling and painting opportunities, they're beautiful. They're great models to have, great models to work with, but unfortunately they just miss the mark just a touch.
Yes, I actually have a battle report on my channel, which is Thousand Suns versus Tau, and I did exactly what I've said here. I took a Hellfire missile rack, heavy warp flamer, kept him off in reserve, deployed him, single rail rifle, took him off before he did anything.
Yep.
And that was it.
Yep.
I was like, oh, well, I guess I didn't need those 40 points. All right, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a similar experience where I dropped in a sorcerer. He failed his cast and then got picked up. So it was like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
That's all gone then.
Yeah, and that's... Now, obviously, that's not just a Thousand Suns issue. That is just how Kill Team is sometimes, because we're working with such small points levels. If you choose to take a big model and the enemy has a way to remove that big model, you kind of have to play as if that is going to happen.
Yeah.
Which sucks, because you want to do the cool thing, but you won't. You won't do the cool thing.
Yeah, I have a little mantra that I repeat in my head when I'm trying to figure out averages and what I can expect. And I say to myself, my opponent will roll perfectly average, but I will roll below average. And then if you always sort of think in that mindset, you generally won't be too disappointed. Because then when you start rolling above average, you're, oh, okay, well, things are going great. But when you roll below average, you're like, just as I expected.
Quickly stepping back to the sorcerer there, don't forget you don't have a power sword. You have the force stave instead.
Force stave,
which is better, so that's fine. Not a problem. And whilst we said with the Terminator, You only have an Inferno Combi Bolter. That's not worth it for the points. An Inferno Combi Bolter is still really good.
Yeah.
So when that's something that's on your model, regardless, as you would, of course, mainly be taking the Sorcerer here, so that you can get that Psybolt, so that you can have another really tough melee beat stick. An Inferno Combi Pod is pretty good to have as part of your roster. It can lock down a side, not as effectively as the Soul Reaper cannon, but still
pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody really wants to run into it.
Yeah, the Sorcerer can, if you want to, switch out your Inferno Combi Bolter for a Power Sword. If you really, for some reason, need that AP -3 damage 1 in combat, but either way, you're still having the Force Stave. So I personally don't ever see a reason to do that, but I suppose there maybe is some very small niche reason why you'd want that somewhere, I'm sure. But generally, yeah, you're going to see them only Combi Bolter and Force Stave.
Yeah. I believe the Sorcerer there is also the only way to get a Leadership 9 on the board, if that's something you're very concerned about. So I suppose there is, perhaps when we look at the list, this will happen. We said right at the beginning that the Rubric Marine Aspiring Sorcerer is something I've never seen not be taken. It is possible you could go with the Occult Sorcerer as your Psyker. Don't take the Aspiring Sorcerer, just take the Occult Sorcerer and then just Tzaangor spam. And that is it's double the points, so I'm not sure I'd do it. But it's not the craziest thing if there's a real reason to have a Terminator on the board.
Yeah, and that is one of those cases where, like a Rubric Marine to the Scarab Occult Terminator, you're not actually getting any real buffs to durability, but there is something to be said for the Scarab Occult Sorcerer over the regular Sorcerer, because he does have his 2-up Terminator armor, whereas the Aspiring Sorcerer only has the 3-up Marine armor. So there's a marginal defensive benefit to go there, and of course actually like a quite large offensive output, because he's got the Combi Bolter over the pistol. So there's an argument to be made for him. I don't know if the points shake out to be worth that, like you just said, but again, on the roster for sure, as a non-leader specialist, and you know, you could make a case for it against certain kill teams.
Definitely. You would just have to be super committed to never letting the enemy see him with a powerful gun, basically. Yeah. Because you can't waste 40 points.
No.
Whereas if you have to throw away the Aspiring Sorcerer at 21 points, you can kind of be like, well, okay. If it wins me the game, I'll take this gamble. But 40 points, I'm not sure I'd have the balls, basically.
Yeah, he's such a tough one to justify. I mean, there's definitely room for him in like narrative and fluffy games, but yeah, if you're trying to make the limited data sheets that you have work, he's there on your roster, and maybe you'll take him once in a while, but
very niche pick. And that's the data sheets done. Oh, until we get to the commanders. But before we get, that's kind of the last thing we'll talk about. We do want to have a quick cover of tactics. We're not going to talk about every tactic, but we are going to just kind of pick out one or two that we think are ones to keep in mind throughout every game. Of course, no tactic is a you will always use this tactic. But there are some very interesting ones. Do you have any specifically? Tactics?
Yeah, so I kind of have a bit of a flow chart in my head for tactic use with Thousand Suns, because before shooting, before fight and all that stuff, you do have your psychic phase. So the way I think of it is, I can't decide on a tactic to use for later on in the phase until I've made it past Psychic. Because with Psychic phase, you can Perils of the Warp and actually end up killing your own sorcerer with that. I always try to hold a CP for the command point reroll, just on the off chance. So I try, even if I might use something in the movement phase, I always try to keep at least one for the Psychic phase, because if you Perils of the Warp on a double 1, you have to reroll it. You have to.
Yeah.
If you Perils of the Warp on a double 6, you can make a case for keeping that and trying to survive it, because then it is D3 mortal wounds. So depending on what you're going into with your Cybolt, that can matter. But so that's my general first check mark is, did I make it through the Psychic phase? As far as tactics for me, it's kind of a tough one, because when you get into the tactics, you actually get into a lot of really flexible things. There's plenty of ones that are not so hot, but you get into some of them, like the Cycle of Slaughter for the Tzaangors, where you get to fight again for 2 CP, can be impactful because they do have that AP -1. But the real ones that I want to highlight are, in my mind, Guided by the Past and Guided by the Future. And both of these, they're 1 CP, and it's use this tactic when you choose a model from your kill team to shoot in the shooting phase or fight in the fight phase. And until that end of that phase, you can reroll hit rolls for attacks made by this model that target enemy models, and then this is where they diverge. Guided by the Past is models that have already been chosen to shoot or fight this phase. Guided by the Future are models that have not yet been chosen to shoot or fight in the fight phase. And what I like about these is that basically, as long as you're choosing a correct target for it, it is a better command point reroll.
Cool. Yep. These are two things that I have actually never used, because since this release, this was in the annual, wasn't it? They didn't have this in Elites. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually haven't.
Annual.
Yeah. Yes, I haven't needed to use them because I haven't played Thousand Suns that much since then.
Sure.
It's been a year.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's like really good about them, so the command point reroll a single hit or wound or whatever, whereas these are reroll all hits. So, for example, a lot of tactics will mention failed hits, and there's an interesting dichotomy there, because modifiers apply after rerolls. So if you're using a tactic that allows you to reroll failed hits, and let's say your ballistic skill 3, you actually can, and you have modifiers, you actually cannot reroll that 3. Whereas both of these are worded in such a way that you can reroll whichever of the dice you want. So I really like comboing these with like that Soul Reaper cannon for 4 shots, and you get to, instead of rerolling a single shot, you get to reroll 2 or 3 in case you really have fluffed the dice.
Yeah, which is almost, if you're looking at saving points, if you are committed to, Guided by the Past or Guided by the Future, you could say, okay, I really need the points elsewhere because I know I want to take that Terminator, for example. So I'm not going to take a comms Tzaangor to save 3 points on that Brayhorn, but I'm going to spend 1 CP every single turn on that, which is essentially probably the same or better as the comms buff, for example.
Yeah. It's going to do some work for you, and especially now we both agree that the heavy warp flamer is the better option on the Terminator gunner. But for if some reason you wanted to take the Soul Reaper cannon on the Terminator gunner, and you say, oh, I don't know, had him be a heavy specialist. So the heavy specialist there, you use that tactic, so you increase the Soul Reaper cannon shot by 1 and the Hellfire missile rack shot by 1, and you burn Guided by the Past or Guided by the Future. Suddenly you're pumping out an actually really impressive number of shots that you're going to get to reroll all your hits for.
Yes, we probably should have mentioned that back with the Terminator data sheet. If you're going to take the Hellfire missile rack, he should be a heavy. It's only
Yes.
2 shots,
Yeah.
1 CP. You can make it 3 shots. Plus, he's going to have the flamer as well, which is then D6 plus 1 shots. Really efficient use of 1 CP a turn if you make that the heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what those are probably, to me, at least, one of the, or two, I should say, two of the best. It's hard to think of them as two separate tactics, but they are, and you can really squeeze some efficiency out of your team that way. One more that I do just want to point out is just sort of like an honorable mention to a movable automaton. 2 CP, use this tactic when a Rubric Marine Gunner, Scarab Occult Terminator, or Scarab Occult Gunner from your kill team is taken out of action. Roll a d6. On a 4+, they suffer a flesh wound instead. Plenty of kill teams have access to a similar one like this, where it's the 2 CP and roll, and on a 4-up, it's a flesh wound. But when you're playing Thousand Sons, because they're such an elite force, that's really, really impactful. Because, like we said, with the all is dust rule and the 5-up invuln, all of your Marines are just that little bit extra annoying to take out. And so if you can just keep them on past that, yeah, that's definitely worth it if you have the 2 CP for it.
Yes, and also at the same time as you're reading it, for any beginners out there, I think that alone shows you just how strong Death Denied for 2 CP is in the Marines list there. Because this is limited to certain models, and you have to roll a 50-50 4-up. Death Denied, 2 CP, any model lives.
You just get it.
So good. Okay, so over to me. I suppose I'm... apart from the CP reroll in the Psychic phase, which is your most important tactic, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I quite like Malicious Familiar. Which, I mean, it's 1 CP, it's a bit silly, but like, hey. So, several factions have a similar thing. I know Orcs do. It's like Nasher Squig or something like that.
Yeah,
and
Gene Stealer has one called like Acid Spit, but it's on a 5-up.
Gene Stealer cults, yeah. Anyway, it's use this tactic at the end of the movement phase. Pick an enemy model within 1 inch of your leader, so it is leader only. Roll a d6. On a 4-up, they suffer a mortal wound. Now, this can be really good, and you can come up with some sort of crazy ideas if you want to, take the Sorcerer, the Terminator Sorcerer, kit it out, ready to get into combat. And you'll be throwing this out, you'll be psychicking, etc, etc. Just keep it in mind, this isn't something you're going to use often, but equally, if you have gone with the more default Tzaangor leader, who's sitting at the back, your 3 attacks, if something charges you, you're gonna probably kill it, but now you also have a 4-up to get a mortal wound. You're actually pretty killy at that point.
Yeah. And I think of Malicious Familiar a lot for myself as kind of oddly enough, a defensive one, because like you said, the Tzaangor leader in the back, if someone does charge him in, before they even get to swing, you might actually just be taking them out of action. And if not out of action, at least a flesh wound, so then they're -1 to hit. Yeah. So
I'm going to quickly shout out Webway Infiltration. Now, this is essentially Deep Strike, which we have here, which is called Teleport Strike. That's our version, where is 1 CP, and that's Terminator only. Webway Infiltration is 2 CP, but it's any model.
Yeah, and it's up to 3.
Yes. However, they do have to be put all together. You can't put them anywhere on the board. You have to set them up within 2 inches of each other. However, this would be such a dumb, memey list thing to do. But if you want to take 3 Rubric Marines with Warp Flamers and do this, you're going to kill something. Because you're going to have 3 D6 also hitting, strength 4, AP -2, 1 damage, like that. You're essentially going to end up with 3 chances to roll that injury roll. You might as well just consider this 2 CP for a D3 or for a 3 damage weapon if you want. Like, that's how you can view this.
Yeah,
I've never seen anybody do that.
That's a really good way.
But,
Yeah.
but I'd love to see it because it will kill whatever you throw it at.
Yeah, well, that's sort of like the same thing like I was talking about of reserving the Scarab Occult Gunner, where having that in reserve is going to change the way your opponent is going to take their movements. Because suddenly they have to be worried about if they leave, if they do the here's my cheap leader sitting in the back, for 2 CP, you will kill him.
Oh, yeah.
So suddenly they have to screen. They have to screen that leader. They have to keep things back there. And if they're keeping things back to protect their leader, that means they're easier for you to hide from. That means they're not leveraging that damage output against you. And you're probably controlling the mid board. And over the course of a game, that early mid board control can end up winning it for you.
Yes. So I called this a meme list. And it is because I've never seen it, and you are going quite heavily on a single tactic doing things for you. But it will actually do things. Like, you will kill something when you spend those 2 CP. If you can drop all 3 of them down hitting, you've killed something, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. It's all but guaranteed. I mean, I don't know what the math is on 3d6 strength 4 AP2 damage 1 weapons not killing a single model, but it's got to be under 5%.
Yeah. So that is something to consider. It is not the way I've ever seen Thousand Suns played, but it will probably work, apart from that one time where you're at a tournament and it doesn't, and your opponent's like, that was weird. The other thing to note is that actually 3 32mm bases is quite a lot of room. So that's the only negative to this. You do need a lot of space to be able to set these guys up.
Yeah.
But if there's space,
that being said, though, thinking of the large amount of space needed to set them up, if you and your opponent both have a good amount of models in reserves, actually, like you said, 3 32mm bases, especially if they're like in a line 2 inches apart, that's a ton of room on a kill team board. And if you're looking to push out your opponent's own reserves, if you get to come in first, there's almost no way that you're gonna have almost a perfect defense, if that makes sense.
Sure. That's kind of it for the tactics, I think. Unless there's anything else you felt really needed to be said there.
Probably not for regular, not until we move to commanders. I mean, there's of course veterans of the Long War, just like some other, but 2 CP for +1 to wound. It's not bad. It's just, and then the rest of them are really, really quite situational. So the likelihood that you're going to have the CP to spend them in those really edge cases, it's almost not worth bringing up.
Yeah. I mean, on the off chance you're against Space Wolves and you can use Vengeance for Prospero, even then, it's not that great a tactic.
Right.
Like, it doesn't change things hugely. You get an extra attack on a 4-up instead of a 6-up, but you're not a melee team, really. I mean...
Right. The real model you'd want to use Vengeance for Prospero on would be a Tzaangor, but they, I don't believe they have Death to the False Emperor.
They do not, no.
Yeah, so it doesn't work for them. So it's really, like I said, it's one of those things, the likelihood that you'll, even against a Space Wolf player, use Vengeance for Prospero, it's like, maybe.
Oh, but I will call out one of, possibly the most useless tactic. Sorcerer's Focus. Now, it's 2 CP. You have to have... I'll read it to you, okay? Use this tactic at the start of your turn in the Psychic phase. Pick a Psycho model from your kill team that is within 2 inches of at least 2 other models from your kill team. Add 6 inches to the range of this model's Cybolt Psychic power until the end of the phase.
Yeah. Why?
You're already 21 inches. It doesn't even let you then pick who you're going to target. It's 2 CP. Even at 1 CP, I would never use this. So... crazy.
Again, it's sort of like the faction specific bonus, where if it was just any psychic power, you could make a case
Okay, let's quickly mention Ritual Slaughter as well. Final thing, which is use this tactic at the start of a shooting phase or fight phase if exactly 9 enemy models have been taken out of action during the course of the battle. Until the end of that phase, reroll failed wound rolls for attacks made by models from your kill team. Okay.
Yeah,
Fine.
It's one of those, if you've killed
9 models.
exactly 9 enemy models, this is a win harder button. It's
Yeah.
like I want to just to be better at winning. That I'm probably already controlling the game.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
It's there. It would be nice if it was something easier to accomplish, like 2 enemy models or 3 enemy models. Then you could look at this. But if you've killed 9, you've probably won. Unless it's super tight and you're down to 1 model left and you've got spare CP and you're like, I've got to go all in. Maybe, but super niche.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's our tactics done. That's kind of everything there is to know about Thousand Suns. If you're new to the faction, you now know everything there is to know. We've actually said quite a bit about each datasheet and how to use them tactically. But we do have commanders to go over, and we also have a few kind of lists to talk about. Shall we quickly do commanders here? Because then when we get to the lists, we then don't have to... all the data sheets are done, kind of.
Absolutely. Again, commanders, it's really easy. There's only 2 data sheets for commanders. There's the Exalted Sorcerer and there's the Tzaangor Shaman. And the way I like to think about these guys is the Exalted Sorcerer is the expensive one.
Yep.
And the Tzaangor Shaman is the cheap one.
Yes.
So if you want to run a more elite commanders list, you're going to take the Exalted Sorcerer. He also gets an extra cast over the Tzaangor Shaman, but and then if you are wanting a more cheap, more model-focused commanders list, you're going to take the Tzaangor Shaman. The Exalted Sorcerer, he's basically a aspiring sorcerer, 6-inch move, but upgrade his weapon and ballistic skill to 2 up. He's strength 4, toughness 4. He's got the 5 wounds, which is not bad.
Not bad.
That means that if you're hit with, say, something like a las cannon or dark lance or other d6 damage weapon, they only have a 33% chance of taking you out in 1 shot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not bad. He's got 4 attacks. He's got the Force Stave as well. So again, a pretty good melee character. Leadership 9, a 3-up save. He's got Death to the False Emperor. He's got the 5-up invuln. He's got the transhuman physiology. So he's gonna do some work for you if you take him. Is he gonna do 81 points of work for a level 1 sorcerer? I don't know.
No.
But he does get 2 casts and 1 deny. And now that's really, if you're taking him, you're not taking him to leverage him as a shooting or melee beatstick. You're taking him because he himself can do your 2 casts.
Yes. The quick thing to notice, he does have weapon options. He can swap his Inferno Bolt pistol out for a Warp Flame pistol. Do not do that. Or the Plasma, because they are 7 points.
Yeah.
They are not 1
really
point.
too expensive.
They are 7. Don't do it. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, he also gets the frag and the crack grenade, which is another reason why not to take the plasma pistol, because you take the crack grenade and you just don't have to worry about killing yourself on a 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one more thing to note though is actually that he can just take a power sword as well. Doesn't cost him any more. Yep. He just has the option of the Force Stave and the power sword. So he's actually, with 4 attacks, he's not bad in melee.
He's not bad.
He can get things done.
Yeah, he also he can take a Disc of Tzeentch to upgrade his movement to 12 and give him fly and the demon and cavalry keywords. And it also gives him an extra attack in close combat with the blades of the disc. For 20 points for the disc, though, I personally can't justify it with such an elite team already. and you probably want him. You do want him forward to do combat, but you don't want him so far forward from the rest of your team,
Yeah.
And out on his own, unless you're playing him that way as just like a suicide unit. But for basically 101 points for the sorcerer on disc, I'm not sure that that's worth it at all.
Don't get me wrong, being able to move 12 inches or whatever it is really nice. However, yeah, 101 points. The only reason I would say take the disc is if you very specifically only have a 100 point list and a commander's list, and you want to make that as easy to incorporate into each other as possible, then he's a single model to add, and suddenly you're playing a commander's game. Then that's really cool. I do like that.
That's
option.
totally fair. Yeah.
Outside of that, don't. I can see a reason to maybe say take him as the 81 point model. I don't know when I would, if I'm honest, but sure. However, for Thousand Suns, I think the Tzaangor Shaman is really where your commander options are at. Do you want to tell us why?
Yeah, so the Tzaangor Shaman sort of takes some of the best things about the Exalted Sorcerer and just Tzaangors and kind of smashes them together. So you'll notice immediately he's movement 12. That's because he comes standard on the disc, and he is 40 points at level 1. So he is literally under half the cost of the Exalted Sorcerer on foot, and he is also under half the cost of just the Exalted Sorcerer on disc. So you get the benefits of the disc without the cost of the disc. Weapon skill, ballistic skill 3 up, strength 4, toughness 4, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, 6 up save. But again, he's got the 5 up invulnerable save. So really, you're on the invuln. He's got the force stave as well, so he's still hitting pretty well in combat. And then he's got the disc, so he gets the little extra attack there. He has 1 manifesting of a psychic power. But then this is the really important part, is that he's got the sorceress elixir rule, where he can re-roll the first failed psychic test you take for the model. That is super powerful. Whether it's a Cybolt or one of the Discipline of Tzeentch psychic powers, that's just basically a free CP for the game. Because like we said earlier, when it comes to tactics, I have that little flow chart of like, did I make it through the psychic phase? Did I spend the CP? If not, I'll go here. If I did, I'll go there. Whereas he just gets to re-roll it for free the first time, which is really nice.
Definitely. Yeah, take him. If you want to think about it points wise, compare the Tzaangor Shaman with the Exalted Sorcerer, and then compare the Tzaangor Shaman and a Terminator, because that's how many points you have. So I think every single time I would rather take the Shaman and a Terminator than the Exalted Sorcerer.
Agreed.
There you go.
Agreed. You're going to get more flexibility. You're going to get more damage output. And while, yes, the Exalted Sorcerer does get the extra cast, anyone who's played enough of Thousand Sons or Grey Knights knows that sometimes an extra cast just means an extra perils. Well,
yes. The other thing to note is that once you've gone up to commanders, your subfaction ability of being able to cast two psychers a turn actually matters.
Yes.
So in a weird way, the higher up in points cost you go with Thousand Sons, the better you become, because suddenly you have to take one of these commanders, so you no longer have to worry about, should I put another psyker into my list anyway? And it makes list building quite kind of easier. In a sense, you don't have to worry, should I take the expensive Terminator so that I'm actually, maximizing my abilities. And so, yeah, I quite like the Tzaangor Shaman. And
I think for 40 points, I think he's, unless you are specifically trying to include the Exalted Sorcerer for, maybe fluff reasons, or because that's the model you have. Like, for example, if you just bought the Start Collecting box and you're like, okay, I'm just going to take Ahriman as the Exalted Sorcerer because that's the model I have.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you go the Tzaangor Shaman route.
Definitely.
Now, we can't talk about commanders without just quickly breaking down the Discipline of Tzeentch, which is your 3 psychic power options. And I'm just going to start with number 1, Gaze of Fate. That's my personal favorite. That's the one that I would pick almost every time. It's a warp charge value of 6, so pretty reliable to cast. And if manifested, you can re-roll a single advance, charge, psychic, deny, hit, wound. It's just basically a free CP re-roll on a manifest of 6, which, as I said, my entire flow chart of Thousand Suns tactics thought process is, am I having to re-roll the psychic tests? And so having Gaze of Fate on there just immediately opens up so much more flexibility for your whole army. Then you get number 2, Treason of Tzeentch, warp charge of 8. If manifested, select an enemy model that is within 12 inches of the psyker and visible. Roll 2d6. If the result is greater than the character's leadership characteristic, the model is treated as if it were a model from your kill team in the subsequent shooting and fight phases, and at the end of the fight phase, the model reverts to being an enemy model. This one is really fun. It's really cool, but the fact that you have to manifest an 8 and then against most armies roll another 8 up. You have to roll 8 plus twice minimum. It's cool and fun and fluffy, but if you're looking to win your game, you probably just pass.
Yeah, just to quickly say, so obviously we already know that you can re-roll the psychic roll if you fail, obviously, but you cannot re-roll the actual spell effect of having to roll above their leadership. So it's so cool. And if it happens, I'd almost take it as a win more, because if you get this to go off, like, firstly, you are stopping the enemy from doing anything with that model completely for a phase, essentially, for shooting and fighting. So they're not killing anything. But also, you are potentially able to then attack the enemy, potentially even with both shooting and fighting, depending on how the activations went there.
Right.
So, really,
yeah, that's. It's like it's right there again. It's like one of those like.
It's something you want to use, but you won't.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Then you have Bolt of Change, Warp Charge 9. If manifested, the closest enemy model within 12 inches of the psyker and visible to him suffers D3 mortal wounds. Now, again, it's not bad. It's just basically a better Psybolt, but for Warp Charge value of 9, I just think Gaze of Fate gives you just the better of these 3 options. It gives you the most flexibility. Bolt of Change, again, not bad, but it's that closest enemy model within 12. So it's just like Psybolt, where you are going to have to position yourself appropriately. Now, that would be the argument for the Tzaangor Shaman having the fly and 12-inch move, or with the Exalted Sorcerer being on the disc, is that with the Bolt of Change, you can more accurately place it where you want it to be. But again, you're probably suiciding at that point.
Yeah, a quick thing to note is obviously 12 inches plus 3 inches from your subfaction ability.
Right.
I suppose it has to be said, but D3 mortal wounds, the majority of models you go up against are one wound, so the D3 doesn't matter. You're still only doing 1 damage.
Right.
Obviously, well, hey, Marines, and these are commanders, so you will have other commanders on the board, so potentially useful.
Yep. Potentially useful also against the new heavy intercessor.
Yes, very true.
3 wound Marines. 33% chance to take them to the injury roll if you've cast successfully.
Not bad. Yeah.
Now, both for Treason of Tzeentch and Bolt of Change, that's where you get into, like you just said, the extra 3 inches can really matter, especially on Treason of Tzeentch if you want to try to get it off, because then that becomes 15, and then that's where, again, that tactic that we mentioned before, sorceress focus, that's where, like, again, it just misses the mark because it specifies Cybolt, and you're like, ah, man. But you do have Power of the Cabal, which is 2 CP, and that is add 1 to the result of a psychic test for each friendly model other than shaken models within 3 inches of the model attempting to manifest. So that's where, with Treason of Tzeentch or Bolt of Change, you could actually, if you cluster your friendly models next to your commander and burn 2 CP, you know, you could more reliably get off a Bolt of Change or a Treason of Tzeentch. Again, it doesn't help with the trying to beat the leadership on Treason, but not bad.
And still 2 CP.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I suppose I would also say, for me personally, I like the cheaper Tzaangor Shaman. I would potentially take Gaze of Fate and run him as a strategist. So as a strategist, you're getting an extra CP. Gaze of Fate is potentially essentially another CP a turn as well. And suddenly you're actually going to be quite numerically effective because you're going to be able to reroll so much and still use your tactics. So take that into account.
Yeah.
And I think that's this entire codex done, and we can actually go over to the lists that we have. So 100 Tsons fluff. Now you created these lists, of course.
Yeah. Now I threw these together. I put fluff on things that I think were more fluff focused than competitively minded. This one here, as you look it over, you're just going to see really, really easy list here. If you can make almost all of these just out of the start collecting box, which is part of the thought process here. You've got your aspiring sorcerer leader. You've got your Rubric Marine with the Warp Flamer. I think so. As I'm looking over my my list here, I realize there's been an issue with Battlescribe, and it's dropped my specialisms off of here.
Okay.
So
well,
what do I have them marked as a?
So your Warp Flamer is demo. Your Soul Reaper Cannon is heavy, and your Twist Spray is Zealot.
Is the Zealot, yeah. And then you've got 2 Rubric Marines, just basic guys, one with the icon of. So this is, I think this is a great, like, absolute beginner list. If you and your buddies are just playing Kill Team for the first time, I think this is a great place to start because it's going to teach you a lot about the strengths and weaknesses. Now, like we said, the Twist Bray is better as a leader, but this is a more fluff-focused list. So we've got the Aspiring Sorcerer there. You're going to want to use him, of course, to cast your Cybolts and to move up the board and threaten melee. Having him in the leader, though, is going to probably in 1 or 2 games, you're going to immediately learn why we say that you want him as the combat and you want the Twist Bray as the leader. You'll play 1 or 2 games. You'll have him taken out of action. You'll feel that impact of what losing a leader really does to your kill team. And then you'll go, yes, Twist Bray it is then for the leader. Yes. Now the Warp Flamer is the demolition. I just like Flamers as demolitions because suddenly anything T4 you're wounding on 3s.
Yes.
Anything T5 you're up to 4s. And you can advance and get that. The Soul Reaper Cannon as the heavy is nice there for that heavy specialism tactic to boost up his number of shots. And then the Twist Bray as the Zealot is actually, it's not the best. I never use it because, of course, he's always the leader. Yep. But actually as a Zealot, he's quite good because then he's putting out 4 attacks at strength 5, AP -1 on the charge, which will... Again, in just a completely, like you and your friends have just picked up a couple boxes and are just starting to play, that Twist Bray is going to do so much work for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you've got 2 Rubric Marines to sit on your backfield objectives and shoot, and maybe an Icon of Flame pops off during the course of the game, and if not, it was 1 point. And 99 points, so number of Tzeentch is 9, so there you go.
Now... Yeah, exactly. Good list, does a little bit of everything, and also I think a good beginner list, as you'll realise how durable your Rubric Marines are. Like that, there's only 6 models there, but that's a really tough list to shift with 4 really durable models. And also, it's quite easy with Thousand Suns to plug and play. So if you remove a single Rubric Marine with a single Inferno Bolt Gun there, take that out, put in 2 Tzaangors. Suddenly you have a almost completely different list on your hands, because suddenly you have models you can hold back or rush forwards. Yeah.
Yep. And then the nice thing about that, like I said, is you are going to, by playing that list, you are going to immediately in like 1 or 2 games, you are going to be revealed the strengths and the weaknesses of the faction almost immediately, because you're sort of like hindered a bit. And so when you start doing that plug and play, like you said, that tweaking, it's gonna come in clutch for you. You'll notice an immediate spike in power for the faction, which will be nice as a new player, like, coming into it.
Okay, and we go over to the 100-point list Tsons.
Okay. So so this one, we've got the Twist Bray in the leader. We've got an Aspiring Sorcerer with the Warp Flame Pistol. That's our combat guy, like we said. We've got a Rubric Marine with an Icon of Flame, and the Warp Flamer, he's our veteran, if I'm remembering correctly. And then we've got our Rubric Marine Gunner with the Soul Reaper Cannon with the demolitions. Yep. And then 2 basic Rubric Marines. Now this one is, like you said, it's that all we're doing is we're flipping a few specialisms, and we've got we've done nothing to the model count. We've just flipped a couple specialisms, flipped 1 piece of war gear, and suddenly you've got what I would consider a much stronger list. You've got your Twist Bray sitting back there, gaining you those command points in safety, hopefully, on an objective. Your Aspiring Sorcerer now is comfortable moving up the field, attacking the mid-board, or side-bolting what he can. He's got that Warp Flame Pistol now, so if he's stuck in over the course of a round, that's all right. Now, the Icon of Flame Warp Flamer Veteran, this is like a piece of tech that you spend the veteran tactic, you move up the board turn 1, or before, I should say, before turn 1, and you're hopefully on an objective or controlling like in an arena, you're controlling a key piece, like a choke point. You've got the Warp Flamer, so you don't mind being charged. And you've got the Icon of Flame, so even if they charge you and they live through the Overwatch, then they might actually, just in the psychic phase, just be wiped out right there, because they might already have a flesh wound on them. You've got your Demolition Soul Reaper Cannon. He can move around again because dust, so he ignores the -1 to hit. And then again, you've got your 2 Rubric Marines for screening for your leader, holding backfield objectives, or just moving up the board. What I really like, though, about this list is the Icon of Flame veteran with the Aspiring Sorcerer, because when you move him up the board like that, you're simultaneously inviting a charge in turn 1 and deterring the charge in turn 1. And if they do charge, like I said, they have to go through AP -2 Overwatch. They have to live through an Icon of Flame being activated. And if they've lived through all of that, then they have to live through a Psybolt as well, because that's almost for sure going to be the closest enemy model to your Sorcerer. And then you've probably killed them through that. Now your Warp Flamer's open to fire again.
Yes.
So you can really surprise some people with that little combo.
Definitely. If they believe that they have tied you up in a charge, then whereas your Warp Flamer had veteran moved and was within 8 inches of, essentially covering the opponent's objective, they've got a charge off on you. They feel they are safe to move their models onto their objective, but you then remove them with the Psybolt, and you can open up. I mean, that's a game winner, turn 1, essentially. If that happens,
Yeah. The only weakness of this is that if you are facing a more horde-focused list, like an Orcs, even I think a really savvy Gene Stealer cult player with just cheap Acolyte spam could actually really work around this and give you a lot of trouble, because outside of your Soul Reaper cannon and your flamer, you don't really have the volume of shots needed to really like put down the hurt.
That is true. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to 125 elites list. Tsons.
All right, so we've got our 125 elites list. Now this is again, this is sort of we're going to lean heavily on. It's your first time playing with the Terminators. You're going to want to bring them. Again, this is going to really show off both strengths and weaknesses depending on how it goes. We've got the Twist Bray for the leader. No big surprise there. We've got a Rubric Marine gunner with the Soul Reaper cannon. That's our demo because he's just absolutely reliable. You know, we've got our Scarab Occult gunner with the Hellfire missile rack. We've put the Soul Reaper cannon on him because if you notice, this list is only 5 models. You need the backfield presence in this. But now you've got 2 Soul Reaper cannons. You've got your heavy, so you're absolutely just pumping out the shots. So your demo and your heavy are your backfield holders. Yeah. Then you've got your Scarab Occult Sorcerer combat. We give him the combat because he's already got everything the Aspiring Sorcerer has, but he's got that 2-up save. And then you've got your just Aspiring Sorcerer with the Warp Flame pistol. So your 2 sorcerers advance up the field. Meanwhile, your Twist Bray and your 2 gunners sit back and shoot. In an arena style list, this will not function. This is this is definitely a like an open focused one, but this is, if you want to lean, just it's almost like a 50-50 split between, you get some powerful shooting, you get some powerful melee, and if you're smart with your picking your engagements and taking, like, attacking certain positions on the board in a more unified front, you can actually steal out some wins with this list.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting list. I've seen people refer to lists like this as like a Custodes light. If you want to play your faction as if it were Custodes, you know, so anytime you put more than a single Terminator in, you're obviously doing a skew list, I would call it.
Right.
But you know what? That Scarab Occult gunner sat on the back with the Soul Reaper cannon and the Hellfire missile rack as a heavy. That's killing something.
And that's that gunner. That is where you're spending your CP each and every round, because you're spending 1 CP for more bullets, and you're spending 1 CP for guided by the future or past, whichever is appropriate for who you're targeting. He alone will, for the 2 CP investment, he'll remove what you're shooting at.
Yes. And of course, for those unaware, you will be able to fire at 2 things. You know, if you're new to the game, your Soul Reaper cannon can fire at 1 thing on one side of the board, Hellfire missile rack another on the other side of the board. They're both 24-inch range, so you're almost certainly always going to be at -1 to hit, because nobody wants to come near this guy. But with your rerolls, as you say, and your extra bullets from Relentless there, or the heavy. If you're not killing 1 thing a turn, you have a lot of terrain on the board. Let's just say that. Yeah.
This, before we go any further into the lists too, I just want to sort of open up some of my thought processes with Thousand Suns. So so much, because your all of your lists with this faction, they rely on mortal wounds, and the majority of your weapons are 1 damage weapons. What you are really, what I think to make a Thousand Suns list successful is you're not so much looking to remove enemy models every single turn, but you want to sort of spread the love around. And if you can flesh wound enough to start triggering those break tests in the morale phase, because you're excellent at giving out flesh wounds between psychic and all of your 1 damage weaponry. I've won games where I've maybe only removed 2 or 3 models, but the team breaks and then begins to stun lock themselves.
Yeah.
And then you just take what you want to take. And then suddenly maybe your opponent only has 1 or 2 guns on the board, or 1 or 2 pieces on the board that can actually function. And even if they are functioning, they're at a -1 to hit for a flesh wound and a -1 to hit for being a broken kill team.
Yes.
So that's what I think my personal like key to success with the Thousand Suns is: force your break checks, because you can't, outside of the force staves and outside of the Hellfire missile rack, you can't reliably, without CP investment, guarantee a out of action result on your injury checks.
No, indeed, exactly as you say, and we kind of touched upon it earlier. I recall briefly saying it's okay to just flesh wound things, and
Yes.
Thousand Suns are able to flesh wound things very effectively. You only need to accidentally kill 1 or 2 models, and the enemy will start breaking because you're throwing so much lead down board.
Mm-hmm.
They should start to shake. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we've got the 125 fluff, I think.
That's right.
Next.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now this is just the absolute, just utter fluff. You know, the Scarab Occult sorcerer as your leader, your aspiring sorcerer as your combat, your gunner, and then you just got a basic Terminator there. I mean, this is a list that like you've put together the Terminator box. You want to run them. Like you said, it's the Custodes Light. It's the SKU level list. Is it gonna do much? Not really. Is it gonna be fun though?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially if you're only just touching into elites with your friends, you're playing like maybe some narrative games, or you're playing. This list will really function well if you're playing a multiplayer game, like 3 or 4 players. Mm. This list it'll carry you through an interesting game, we'll say.
Yeah, definitely. It's the weird thing about Custodes Light and Custodes themselves is that if you're a new player, it can seem very intimidating to go against, because you'll be shooting into it and you'll be like, why can't I kill anything? And it's like, well, because you're firing las guns at me. Of course you can't. But once they kind of realize that they need specific guns for the task, and 1 or 2 poor rolls from you, and you've got 1 model left. So if you do decide to run this into somebody as a new player, and they started to feel a touch oppressed, let's just say this here isn't like the most powerful list. It's not something that anybody in a tournament would look at it and say, oh wow, I don't know how to deal with this. So if you want to run this, you think it's fun, it's fluffy, do that. It will help your opponent, hopefully, to realize that you need different tools for different jobs.
Yeah. And actually, if you don't mind, if we just rewind to the, because I know I put this one in here too, is the 100-point Tzaangor.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I had alluded to this earlier. This is where this sort of list is where roster building can really come into play, because if your opponent sees your roster of Tzaangors and Thousand Suns, they're going to expect you to run They're going to expect you to run the Marines. They're going to pick plasma guns because they're the perfect thing to kill you. On and on it goes. Then you bring something like this. So you've got your aspiring sorcerer, this time as your leader, because again, we've got the twist braid down in the zealot. All he wants to do is sit back and plink off a mortal wound once in a while, but he does have the warplane pistol. We've got 3 Tzaangors in specialisms. We've got our twist bray, which is our zealot. We've got a Tzaangor combat. We've got a Tzaangor medic. The medic is one of those ones where it's like, it's really interesting. If you spend the CP, you can just boost up someone else, right? The medic doesn't like do anything to himself on his own, but his tactic is actually quite good, because let me grab the medic tactic, because I feel like it's like one of those really overlooked ones, but if your opponent doesn't know it's coming, it can really it can like swing some things for you.
Sure. It's plus 1 CP giving you +1 to attack and strength, is it?
I believe so.
I think.
Sorry, I thought you had pulled it up there, so I.
Oh no,
that
was from memory. Sorry. Yeah.
73.
I just guess it rules.
Ooh, you just right? Okay, so so it's +1 to advance and charge, +1 attack,
Oh,
So,
sorry.
and then so you've got your Brayhorn in, right? So basically, you position this. Some amount of these Tzaangors go to holding objectives. Some amount of these Tzaangors hang out with the Brayhorn and the medic. And so you do something like, let's say you take that twist Bray. If you need to kill a particularly hard target, you stem shot the twist Bray Zealot. He charges in. He gets a +2 to the charge now, +1 for Brayhorn, +1 for medic. So he's very likely going to land that charge. Then he's 2 attacks base, +1 for the +1 for Tzaangor blades, +1 for Zealot, +1 for medic, stem shot. So you're hitting 5 attacks at strength 5, AP -1. And for an opponent who likely, when they've looked at your roster, they've expected you to bring Rubric Marines, to suddenly have an 8-point model hitting them, that much at strength 5. And again, remember, guided by the past and guided by the future, works in the fight phase. And it works on Tzaangors. So suddenly 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling anything that misses. Super cool points if you burn the Zealot tactic on that guy as well for exploding 6s. And then because
5 attacks could happen.
5 attacks, could
Yeah.
happen. And then you get your exploding 6s, your strength 5, AP -1, damage 1. Or you send him into one target and you stem shot just a regular Tzaangor and give them the extra attack. Suddenly,
Spread
between
your
the
threats.
Zealot, between the Zealot, the combat, and the stem shotted Tzaangor, you've got 3 models running around the board that are 3 attacks apiece, hitting on 3's strength, strength 4 or 5 and AP -1. You can really, and of course, this is all about board control. You don't really care if you're killing or not. You just want them tied up with your Tzaangors long enough that your aspiring sorcerer and your other few that are hanging out on objectives don't get shot at.
Yeah.
And you just rack up points as the game goes.
Makes sense. Yep. I don't think I've ever run a list quite like this. I don't particularly care for the medic. But if I were to run this, I'd probably go with I swap the Tzaangor, the medic, for a veteran. I always like that turn 1 move, and something really important about the veteran that some people oft forget is its passive ability, as opposed to its turn 1 movement, is that it always counts as being next to a friendly model when it comes to the...
Right.
Wait, no, that's wrong.
That's the medic. It's
sorry.
the ignored. You're ignoring modifiers
yeah.
to your nerve test.
So you cannot break, you cannot shake with him, which is pretty good.
It's huge, especially on objective control missions for like end of round scoring, and you can even turn off because certain factions have tactics and things like that to shake models, and that veteran just goes, "That's fine.
Yeah.
Don't mind it."
We're done with the Tzaangor rush.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think the last list I sent you was commanders.
Yes. Okay. Do you want to run us through this one?
Sure. So again, this is this is more focused on start collecting box, because this is basically everything I've done has all centered around that start collecting box, and then maybe 1 box of the Terminators, because my channel is more focused on sort of friendly, open play, and so we've got the Exalted Sorcerer, which if you've bought the start collecting is just going to be Ahriman.
Yep.
He's got the Cybolt. He's got the Gaze of Fate. We've kept him as cheap as possible. Now, technically, he can pick another psychic power from the Tzeentch discipline. So if you want to try for that Treason of Tzeentch, or if you choose the
Demon Bolt, Warp
yes,
Bolt, whatever. Yeah,
whatever it is. Basically, the D3 side. You can go either way with that, but he's there. He's your main caster. Now for our leader, we've got your Scarab Occult Sorcerer, which again, he's only the leader there because we just want him to be that little bit extra defensive with the 2-up save. You've got your Aspiring Sorcerer Combat, your Soul Reaper Cannon demolitions guy, and we've got your Scarab Occult gunner again on the heavy train there. That's again, there is your command point sync, that guy. For people, like once people learn how to play around him, then you can just put him up on the shelf and go, man, what a cool.
Yeah.
But as long as they are not ready for him, he's going to be putting in so much work. And of course, he's got the heavy warp flamer, like we discussed before, as the like more optimal pick. And then we've just got a cheap Tzaangor down in non-specialists for objective holding. Now, the way this would really want to function is you're going to do something. Now, you can only do the 2 casts in the psychic phase, but your Exalted Sorcerer can cast 2, your Scarab Occult Sorcerer can cast 1, your Aspiring Sorcerer can cast 1. So you have up to 4 casts. So what this does for you is you have flexibility of putting 1 or 2 in reserves to, like, you could put your Exalted Sorcerer in reserves, keep them safe for later, and as your opponent maybe picks off the Aspiring Sorcerer, the Exalted comes on to fill in that cast, to backfill. Or you have almost a pseudo Grey Knights list thing here, where you've got multiple positions where they're not sure where the Cybolt is going to come from.
Yeah.
And so you have options of, if you couldn't quite get the Exalted in position, maybe the Aspiring Sorcerer can advance and get into position to get that Cybolt exactly where you need it.
I think we're done. That's 1,000 Suns. That's a bunch of starter lists. Yeah. I suppose the other thing we could talk about, which is going to be super quick, I know, is how to start collecting with them from a hobby perspective. And there's just one box you need.
That's it.
Start collecting box.
Start collecting. It's in the name.
Yeah.
Once you've played around with that, you can flex into a box of Terminators, and then you've collected the entire range for Kill Team. That's one of the big draws for them, or, well, I should say outside of the Tzaangor Shaman for Commanders, but that's one of the big draws for them, is that they're so easy to collect. Now, they're definitely a challenge for hobbying. Such beautiful models and so much gold trim.
Yeah. I suppose I would quickly say one thing, and I've said this in my start buying guide, is that I really like the start collecting box, in addition to, because if what you do is Ahriman, in there he's a 40mm base. All of the Terminators are also on 40mm bases. So if you haven't quite decided if you want to go and get the Terminators or whatever, just use Ahriman as a proxy for any of the Terminators. He's on the right base. He obviously also easily proxies. Yep. He obviously also proxies in for either of the commanders, which are both on 40mm bases. No, that's not true. Sorry. An Exalted Sorcerer is a 32mm base.
Yeah.
Unless you put him on a disc. Yeah. But like, great model. I can't see why you wouldn't want him on the board. And he's the right base size for any Terminator. There you go.
Yep.
And a Tzaangor Shaman.
Yeah. That's like I said, that's the nice thing with the 1,000 Suns. As far as a beginner faction goes, they're going to teach you so much about the game in such a short amount of time, especially using some of those rubric focused lists. Your turns are going to be quick, snappy. You're not going to get too bogged down. But in those quick, snappy turns, you're going to see exactly what works and what doesn't work in quick order, because you'll either run up against someone who has brought all the right tools to take you out, and you'll see the weaknesses like that, or they'll have a nice mixed list, and you'll see, okay, I need to prioritize killing this to keep these guys safe. And then when you build and start playing the Tzaangors, you'll see just how much utility those cheap chaff units provide you.
Yes, they're a very unique type of cheap chaff in this army as well, which just completely flummox some players, because they're like, well, I'm equipped to take out elites, and I'm equipped to take out hordes, but not hordes that are T4 with an invuln save. I don't have that in my roster.
It's that T4 that really does it, because I can't tell you the number of times someone shot me with a strength 7 weapon, and they roll the dice and they're like wounding on 2s because they would expect it to be T3, and you're like, well, actually,
T4.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, very quickly from a hobby perspective, I believe one of the main reasons people don't play Thousand Suns is because they're very intimidating. And
Yeah.
I actually have, Matt can't see it, but obviously you guys can. Um, Behind me, you can see my models, who I have, they look impressive. This is all contrast paint. I, like, I actually think they look really good. I've done them in a silver and red, with blue cloth. It's really easy, actually. Like, this doesn't take long at all to do. The thing that stopped me was Tzaangors, because there's actually a lot of detail on the Tzaangors, and I
There's a
couldn't.
ton of
Yeah,
detail.
yeah. But then at the same time, down the outside thigh pad for all of them, all of the detail just goes mushy, and like it's just a
Yes.
big wave. And it's like, well,
Yes.
hold on. Am I trying to be really precise and pick out all of this gilded edge or not? Because the side of the lake, you kind of can't do it now. It all just...
No. Yeah,
So I
just
gave up.
I don't know if that's a weird cast or if that's intended. I'm not sure.
It must be a bad
Yeah.
mold.
As far as not being intimidated by the models, I have seen over on Reddit in the Thousand Suns subreddit, there's a number of people who have taken to some really fun, really easy paint schemes. Things like doing like a stone look. So they do
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
dark gray, they dry
Yes.
brush like the lighter grays and the whites, and then they just hit the eyes with like a bright green.
And the
Bam, you got it.
weapons. Yes. That's
Yes.
exactly what I've done.
Yep.
Except I decided I didn't want them to be statues. I wanted them to be ghosts. So I hit them with the Hex-Ray Flame.
Yes. Yeah.
Then I've put the eyes red, and then I've just done silver blades. Boom. Legal model.
Done deal.
Does it
Yeah.
look good?
That's
Questionable, but they're done.
Well, that's the fun thing. Especially for people getting into the hobby, any experienced hobbyist, any experienced gamer for any of the Games Workshop stuff will tell you painted models, they roll better. They just do better. And the great thing about the community is that it's so welcoming and it's so inviting that even if maybe you're not so happy with your paint job, anyone is going to be happy to see painted models across the table, even if done amateurishly. Even if you're not crazy about them, everyone is going to go, hey, that's awesome. That's awesome that you painted them.
Yeah, definitely.
And then that'll be that.
100%. Everybody prefers playing against painted models. They don't have to be painted well, because your opponent's not going to see them. They're 6 feet away, right?
Right.
They just see blobs of color, and that's all they need.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like I can say, so I've been in this hobby since 7th edition 40K, so close to 5 years now. And I can tell you, day in and day out, I would rather take an absolute tabling, an absolute brutal beating from an even halfway painted army, like a decently painted army. I'll take a tabling from that any day of the week than taking like a really close nail biting game, but everyone's got great plastic. You know what I mean? So it's like just slap some paint on those guys and
do it.
Keep on going.
Anyway, yeah, so Thousand Suns, don't be too intimidated by them. Oh, I suppose the final thing to say is if you've just got your start collecting, you're looking at my models there, and you're like, yeah, I want to do a similar scheme to that, or even just the default scheme. You see the colour that you want to paint the trims, whether it's silver or gold, spray the model that colour. Do not try and do the edging. That will drive you crazy, okay? Spray the model, the colour of the filigree, fill in the blanks. Do not do it the other way round. You will hate yourself. There you go. That's the final thing I'll say on the hobby. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. If you base in the trim color, you'll save yourself hours of frustration. Yes. Speaking from experience, because I did the opposite and regretted every minute of it.
I can imagine. Anyway, that's Thousand Suns. It took us far longer than I thought it would. I've got to be honest. I thought we were going to be done in an hour. an hour tops there. But we really stretched those 3 data sheets out. So
Yeah,
good.
well, you got to make a meal of it.
Exactly. Okay. That's kind of us wrapping up. Matt, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me here on under Odds of War. We do mostly friendly and narrative focused bat reps. We've got a pretty good stable of selection to do that. We also do some faction focuses of our own and things like that. So you can find me on there if you want to see what I'm painting. Since we're talking Thousand Suns, this month I've been painting Magnus himself for 40K. I've got it under hashtag March Magnus.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's I'm there at odds_of_war. So at odds of war, but underscores in between. And that's pretty much it. And then on either of those, you can contact me through either of that, and there you go.
Awesome. I will have links to both of those in the description below, so go check those out if you can't bother to Google stuff. Links will be right there. I suppose I would want to say, in addition to that, when Kill Team first released, I felt like there were a lot of different channels that started to put out some battle reports, and if you wanted to find Kill Team bat reps, you could find them. Nowadays, I'm finding less and less so. The initial hype has gone. There aren't many channels that are still regularly putting out battle reports. That was, sadly, a few months ago the case for you as well. You had to take a quick break, but you are back now. So that's good. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing more banter bat reps as they're termed.
Well, thank you.
And in fact, I will be featuring in a obscure way in one of them coming up very soon. Hopefully,
yeah, coming out very soon.
Tied in with this. In fact, if you've made it this far, it is probably up on your channel now as well, or hopefully will be very soon. So check that out.
Yes.
And that is the Thousand Suns. I think they're really cool, and I will finally one other thing that really attracted me to them, because I'm always thinking about, I want to play 40k as well. I'm always thinking I want my kill team to match in with my 40k, and I'm also a total hipster. And they recently did a meta watch for 40k, and Thousand Suns I think are in the bottom 3 factions. It's like Craftwork. No, it's Genestealer Cults, Tau, Thousand Suns.
Yeah, they're down there.
So I'm loving it. For some reason, I really like that. Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm excited for 9th edition 40k for whenever the Codex comes out, because I can 100% say that I've been playing them before they were cool now.
Yes.
So
yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for making it this far, everybody. I realised that in the beginning, I was just too excited to talk about Thousand Suns that I forgot to give you your customary double hello. So I haven't given you that. That's my fault. I know, but it's okay because I've remembered at the end, and so instead you're going to get a triple hello. If you want a triple hello in the next video, you've got to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Also, very oddly, yesterday, my Hallow economy has recently been given an actual monetary value by somebody. Somebody is willing to pay you 15 cents if you buy their eBay auction and you're a subscriber to me and you have your hellos. They will give you $3 off. Yeah, so there you go. Hellos actually now worth something, so you obviously have to like and subscribe. Anyway,
very nice.
Anyway, Matt, thanks very much for coming on. It's always good, and honestly, I just wanted to help out a fellow Kill Team creator that has just come back. I'm very not precious about my channel and about Kill Team content in general. I think the more the better, and the healthier everybody is, the better for everybody. If somebody gets into Kill Team via your channel because they love the bat reps, maybe they'll find me in some way. So as far as I'm concerned, the more the better. So I hope that we can drive a bit of content your way, and let's do that not just with this video, but also the battle report that we are doing soon. So it's really exciting.
Yes.
So,
well, thank you for having me. Like you said, I mean, the more Kill Team content, the better in my mind. It's the perfect entry into the hobby, I think.
definitely.
And to have it get sort of ignored by the community as far as content creation is a real shame. It's like, we got to,
Yeah.
get it out there. And the games are a breeze,
They're great. They're great.
Yeah.
Hey, I have nothing but positivity for the future of Kill Team. Honestly, this year, I think we're going to get the next edition, and I think Games Workshop is actually going to do it right because they've seen. I think this version of Kill Team was really just kind of out of nowhere for them. Like they've done Kill Teams before,
Right.
Like this isn't the first iteration ever, but for some reason it really hit things right, whether it was the marketing or what. But now with the GW's huge explosion, I think whatever Kill Team is next, and due to algorithm reasons, I hope they change the name, because honestly, Kill Team, YouTube doesn't like you hashtagging things Kill Team. It doesn't like it. So let's hope they change the name.
Yeah.
But that's a weird me thing.
Well, that's the thing with Games Workshop is that every game that they produce is a test bed for another game to be produced. And the thing is, we've seen over multiple editions of 40K, multiple editions of Age of Sigmar, Warcry, Shadow War Armageddon, Kill Team, everything iterates upon itself. And so, man, if this year is the year for a Kill Team second edition, it is going to be an absolute banger of an edition.
I'm very excited. Definitely. Yeah.
Yes. I think there's a lot to be excited about. Yeah.
And because that's not what we're talking about in this interview, we'll stop it right there, I think. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. This has been Mad Oddsward. Check him out. I've been Glass Half Dead, if you haven't figured that out by now. I don't think I've introduced myself yet. But you're on my channel, so you probably know. Anyway, Thousand Suns, really strong team, also very beginner friendly. Definitely check them out. And the final word, of course, is I hope you've had a good day and continue to have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye.